that. She was just trying to throw signals to let me know that she thought that I wasn't ready. So the first day she like took my whole little package, and then when I would sell the drugs to her, I wasn't allowed to put them directly in her hand. I was only allowed to.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Stop. When you sold the drugs to her, you sold drugs to your mum.
Well, yeah, because my mother was like a drug dealing addict. A lot of addicts have a hustle. Some of them steal, some of them prostitute, some of them, whatever. My mom was like a drug dealer. That's how she kept her habit up. So when I was challenging her about having these people in the house, I was trying to become the person who was in the house that was making the money. So my mom, that's how she made her money. That's how she got high. That's how she bought whatever she wanted to buy or gave her kids money. It's like it had to go through her. Anybody that walked through that door had to pay my mom. Anybody who wanted drugs had to give their money to my mom. They wasn't allowed to just come in and just buy drugs. It's like a hierarchy, if you will. So the only person who I could really, not the only person, but the main person who I was going to be dealing with in this situation was her, because she ran the whole situation.
So how did this work? You would go and get drugs to sell, and then you would sell them to your mum, who would then, sell them on to other people?
Right. Yeah. Pretty much.
How does an 11, 12-year-old girl get into that? I mean, how do you go out on the street or wherever and buy enough drugs to become a drug dealer?
Well, it was nothing for me to be able to go get drugs because everybody wanted a piece of the house. Like, people would be glad to actually give me drugs. I didn't have to buy anything. They would just give them to me because they know that they're going to get in a position that, is going to benefit them.
Did you make money?
Yeah. I didn't really see any of it at that time because I was just so young. But I probably, let's say my house probably cleared about, at the minimum, $10,000 a day. That's at the minimum. Yeah. That's what I mean by it was a serious. This was in the in the early 2000s, and crack was still very much prevalent. So this house was, the amount of money that came through there every day, it was just unbelievable. And at the time I was a kid, so I didn't do the right thing with this money, of course. I just used to buy a hoopty. I'm only 13. I'm going to probably crash it up because I can't really drive that well. Or whatever's going to happen to it. And then I'm going to buy another car. That's what a hoopty means, if you guys don't know. But, buying multiple cars once a month probably I got to get a new car because I'm a kid and I don't really know how to manage cars or any of this stuff.
So you buy a car and crash a car and buy a car and crash a car and that was how it went?
Yeah, or, I'll maybe one of the guys that I'm selling drugs for, maybe he might get worried about me driving these cars. Because I remember I'm on drugs too. So I think that's a lot of why I used to crash the cars because I'm not out and stuff, So some of the drug dealers, the elders, would be concerned about my health or my safety. And they used to pay other addicts to, like, I used to catch them pouring sugar in my tanks. I used to catch them, like, doing stuff to my cars. And they would say, well, such and such paid me to put a Snickers in your tank. And he gave me $200. And I would say, well, I'm going to give you $400. Like, leave my car alone. And, like, I would have to give them money so they wouldn't do it. But a lot of times it was only for my safety that, people didn't want me driving. But I didn't care, In my mind, I just want to drive. I want to ride around, pick up girls and all that stuff. So I didn't really get a chance to see any of that money at that age. I was too young to understand.
When you talk about this now, when you think back to that period of your life, does it sound extraordinary to you?
Back then, I knew, like when my friends would come over, who maybe from school, because everyone in my neighborhood kind of knew what it was. So it was normal to them too, because that was just my lifestyle and that's how I was always been. But if I invited like a new girl to my house, right, and she would come and she would see how everything was happening, she would just be like, what? Like, that's your mom? And like, you sell drugs to your mom? Like, and to me it was just like, yeah, this is my life. Like, everybody has their own. Like, don't judge mine. But now that I'm older and I'm in a position where I would never do such a thing, Yeah, I see how nuts it was.
So the neighbourhood was aware, friends were aware, were the police aware of what you were up to?
Eventually, by the time I was 17, me and my mom were arrested 3 times together.
Throughout all these teenage years with the drug dealing and the police coming and all the rest of it, were you still writing poetry or rap songs?
Yes, very much so. Probably the most productive I was in writing, like volume-wise, was around that time. I wrote raps every day.
What did you do with them?
Nothing. I didn't really rap them to many people. I had a couple friends who knew I could rap. My mom knew I could rap, but I had no intentions of like being a rapper. It was just something that I did.
What would you write about?
A lot of violence, a lot of violence. Like if I could think of like one from back then, it starts off with like blast your fast, I'm the last to dash until I get the stash and the cash in the plastic bag, and the aftermath. Have your casket closed. Like I used to talk about like a lot of death and like casket closed, laying for weeks, body filled with maggot holes. Like just like a lot of like gory. Like I used to get really into how creatively can I kill you. It was kind of like the theme of my music back then. But to be fair to myself, that was the style of music back then anyway. So it's not like I was just this outlier. That's kind of what it was.
Were you violent in your actual life or just in your music?
Yeah, no, I wasn't violent in my actual life. Of course, I've gotten into fights. Of course, I've had to do certain things in the streets to maintain a level of respect. Because if you don't, they're gonna like kill you, or they're gonna continuously rob you, or they're gonna continuously like try to rape you, or whatever. So it's like certain things you have to do. But I was never one that like got off on violence. Like it didn't make me happy. It didn't get me excited. It was always like, oh, I'm gonna have to do this because if I don't do this, then this is gonna happen. Oh my god. Okay, well then let's do it. It was like that was always my thing. I was always begrudgingly like, oh, I gotta do it.
How did you get involved in a shootout when you were 18?
A cop that was coming for a sting operation in regards to something that had nothing to do with me, literally nothing. And they were making a lot of noise outside of the house that I was selling drugs in. Wasn't my house anymore. I was operating from across the street now. Because my mom was clean by this time, by the way.
Right.
I went outside to defuse the situation. Just because my neighbors hated me, and I don't know if they hated me, that's the wrong word, but it really bothered them, of course, all the danger and stuff that we would bring to their their homes, like in the vicinity of their homes. So anytime I heard shouting or anything like that, or near fights, I would try to break them up, because by then I'm 18 and I'm a lot more conscious of what's going to get me locked up. So I went outside to try and defuse the situation. I guess at that time the cop may have gotten a little nervous or felt a little threatened or whatever, and he pulled the gun out. But he didn't say he was a cop. He was like plain clothes, regular guy, black guy. And I wasn't going to wait to figure out what he was. I wanted to live. So I pulled my gun out and we started exchanging fire after that.
BL was badly shot up and she was facing a long spell in prison. The future looked like it would follow a depressingly familiar storyline, but there was a huge plot twist to come. We're going to hear more from her tomorrow as Crack Baby becomes BL Sherelle. If you can't listen live, don't worry, we will put the whole story on our webpage and on our podcast feed. Outlook's back in just a minute.
Charges murder indictment. OGs here fighting jailhouse lawyers telling you to fight it. Why you got you on silent? So please option. Sally said it's election year. I don't know what that means.
This is the BBC World Service with the story of the Red State refugees.
I'm Katie Law, and welcome to Cactus, a dusty, end-of-the-road town in the red state of Texas. That's red for Republican. Most of its 3,000 residents are immigrants. Hundreds are resettled refugees. They came because of well-paid jobs at an enormous billion-dollar meat processing plant. Jobs Americans don't want to do. Without this workforce, the plant might have closed. Without the plant, the town might have died. But now, Cactus has a problem. Republican President Donald Trump has dramatically reduced the number of immigrants and refugees allowed to settle in the US. So if these workers can't come anymore, what happens to Cactus and other towns like it? Some of the nation's reddest communities might not survive.
Red State Refugees. Tuesday at 8 and 14 GMT.
Chris Packham has always been obsessed with birds and animals. Humans he found more challenging.
When I got to about 10, 11, my obsession for wildlife, I think, became a little bit tricky for people, because I do remember talking at them for as long as I could possibly speak, which was basically until I ran out of things I knew about something, and them just turning and walking away or telling me to shut up.
He discovered later he had autism and tells Outlook how nature has helped him. First the news.
BBC News with Eileen McHugh. Chancellor Merkel says Russia must investigate the poisoning of President Putin's most prominent critic, Alexei Navalny, and hold to account those responsible. Mr. Navalny was taken ill in Russia last week and held there until Saturday. Berlin hospital treating him says he was poisoned with a substance designed to damage his brain. It warned the poison may have long-term consequences. The authorities in Belarus have detained more opposition and strike leaders after Sunday's demonstrations against the disputed re-election of President Lukashenko. 2 members of the opposition council were arrested and a third called in for questioning. 2 strike leaders were detained. President Trump has addressed the Republican National Convention after it officially nominated him as the party's candidate for the presidential election in November. To chance of 4 more years from the crown, Mr. Trump spoke about his achievements in office and alleged that his opponents would try to manipulate the election. A multi-story building has collapsed in Raigad in western India, reducing parts of it to rubble. It's feared dozens of people have been trapped. The latest round of talks between the different sides in the Syrian conflict has been put on hold because of delegates testing positive for coronavirus. The UN brokered talks are aimed at drafting a new constitution. Talks between West African mediators and the military men now running Mali have ended without a deal on how the country should return to civilian rule following last week's coup. A spokesman for the military said the final decision on any interim administration would be decided by Malians. And the Brazilian congresswoman Flordelis de Souza has been charged with ordering the execution of her husband, who was shot more than 30 times on his doorstep last year. Detectives have instead written to Congress with details of an investigation, asking for Ms. de Souza to be stripped of her parliamentary status. BBC News.
Hello, I'm Jo Fidgen and you're with Outlook. Now, another chance to hear a wonderful story about the power of nature. The name Chris Packham will be familiar to many British people. He's always on TV talking about wildlife. A couple of years ago, he spoke to Saskia Edwards about his own life and how the natural world has helped him cope with autism. They met in Chris's garden.
There's blackbirds singing over in that direction. There's swallow song there. There's the blackbird and the swallow together.
Naturalist Chris Packham has an encyclopedic knowledge of plants and animals. He's standing in the front garden of his secluded woodland home, picking up the individual sounds of the cacophony of birds that surround us. His ears are almost like a bird call search engine.
I mean, this should be dawn chorus time, to be honest with you. But it's a little bit cold and wet, so some of the warbler species that are here that should be singing now, blackcap and lesser whitethroat, which live in the garden here, they're not singing. I can't blame them, frankly. They're going to wait until the sun comes out. Who wouldn't?
But Chris Packham is not just a nature enthusiast. He's one of the most famous wildlife experts in the United Kingdom, appearing on television programs for more than 30 years.
Yes, welcome to Spring Watch. It's our first programme of 2030.
One remarkable thing about animal brains is their miniaturisation. The brains inside...
Well, this is Clyde. This is a male red-backed shrike. It, for me, is one of the most splendid birds in all the world.
What's helped make Chris Packham famous, what's given him this brilliant knowledge of nature, is also a condition that's been isolating and devastating.
Come in. Let's go through the kitchen door here. I've been to the shop to get some milk so I can make a cup of tea.
That's very thoughtful of you.
Trained by my mother. Anyone who visited the house was always given a cup of tea. The window cleaner, the baker.
We've been trained well.
I don't know, you haven't tasted the tea yet.
Chris later revealed he wasn't really bothered if I wanted tea or not. He just knew it was the polite thing that people do. In fact, he's always thinking about social etiquette, making conscious efforts to look me in the eyes while most of the time he avoids my gaze. When you meet Chris and if you go into his house, it's striking how ordered everything is. The books, the bottles of whiskey, the photographs on the wall match the objects on the table. He considers everything.
All of the objects in this room, the shape of the room, the fabric of that room is all related. It's all connected. If anyone comes into the room and they move anything, then immediately it's jarring. If they move one of the bottles by a centimetre, to me, they might as well move it by a mile, because it's interrelated to everything else in this space. So I don't need to control yours. The fact that that cup of tea is not in the middle of the coaster is not something that I would do. My tea would be in the middle of the coaster would be aligned and the handle would be aligned and so on and so forth. But you know, I've given that space to you, so this is not something which I find disturbing. I mean, I live with Scratchy here, and you know, he may well, you know, move his toys around and leave them in, you know, places. So I do put those away.
The Scratcher that you referred to is the 15-year-old poodle, I should mention deaf and partially blind poodle, which is in your lap.
Well, his sight isn't so bad. It's actually pretty good for a dog his age. His hearing has gone, which is a worry to me now, because obviously if I lose him, he can't hear me calling. He hears me if I whistle, so there's something about the tonality of a whistle which means that he can hear it.
How would you describe your relationship with Scratcher?
Consummate. We are best friends, and we have been for, you know, best part of 15 years.
We should probably go back a little bit. Let's start when you were a child. You didn't grow up far from here, right?
No, I grew up on the eastern side of Southampton in a 1930s estate which, you know, had access to, you know, what the council called wasteland, but it was never wasted on me. It was unbuilt land. So there were fields behind the house and woods.
Please take the first exit from the roundabout in 17 yards onto A312.
Everything I found, you know, I remember picking up a dead starling in the gutter and unfolding its wing was just beauty beyond compare.
Now take the first exit from the roundabout.
Respond to this absolute, if obsession is a fair word, with nature.
Initially it was okay, but when you get to a point, perhaps when I got to about 10, 11, that point my obsession for wildlife, I think, became a little bit tricky for people, because I do remember talking at them, expounding without any form of punctuation.
Please take the second exit from the roundabout in 300 yards onto A312.
Telling me to shut up. Yeah, you know, kids don't like different kids, and they are vicious organisms, and if it wasn't direct.
Now take the second exit from the roundabout.
It was the exclusion which became more painful, because by the time I'd got to my sort of early mid-teens, they were all having parties and they were getting girlfriends and all that sort of thing, and I was obviously never invited and couldn't be a part of that.
At that time when you were growing up, were you thinking, is there a reason, is there some kind of name I can put to why it's harder for me to connect with people, why I have this intense feeling towards every subject I have to learn about? Did you ever think why?
No, I didn't, in truth, because obviously I thought that I was normal and they weren't.
What is a kestrel?
Kestrels are the most fantastic birds.
Please follow the road for 2 miles.
There are many species of kestrel, but the Eurasian kestrel, common kestrel, lives in Europe, and when I was a kid they were the commonest bird of prey in the UK. Now I've thumbed through my field guide and I looked would look at golden eagles and things like that, but they were, I mean, that was like thumbing through your wish list of girlfriends and finding Grace Kelly and Audrey Hepburn. I mean, they're just so far out of your league, they didn't really exist, so it didn't matter. But what did exist and flew around near me were kestrels.
How much did you think about them?
Well, I thought about them and nothing else.
And of course you wanted one for yourself. So you applied for a permit, that was denied, but you resolved that you still wanted one.
Nothing could quash that desire. I mean, that's what it came down to. So when I did find a nest with a young bird in it, I resolved to take one out.
What would you do with the bird?
Well, every day I'd get up as soon as it got light, and I'd go out and take it out and train it and fly it on the little bit of wasteland behind the houses. And, you know, the thrill of being able to release a bird completely untethered and it coming back was, well, sort of enchanting. Empowering as well, you know. I felt so strong. It gave me such strength to think that I'd been able to train a wild animal to the extent that it would actually come back to me and keep coming back as well.
That was the happiest time of your life.
Undoubtedly.
How long did the bird live?
Well, I got it on the 26th of June and it died on the 6th of December. But I couldn't see that it was dying. So
Please take the second exit from the roundabout in half a mile.
that was impossible. It was too important to die. How could the most important thing on earth die? It's ridiculous. It was utterly untenable. So of course, when it did die, I had no means of coping with that at all. Absolutely.
Please take the second exit from the roundabout in 300 yards onto A312.
Wild, that perhaps it would have lived longer.
Now take the second exit from the roundabout.
You know, winter birds like that are incredibly high. It's part and parcel of the process. The disease that it got from a wild bird which I'd fed it, and many wild kestrels would die of the same thing. So no, I was never guilty about that.
How did that experience shape your connection with people and animals afterwards?
It was further isolating. I mean, I couldn't speak. You know, I lost the ability to speak, and my parents sent me to school, and obviously that I was already a freak, but
Please take the third exit from the roundabout in half a mile.
beating and bullying, that is. So that was just pretty much the end of it, really.
After school, you went to university, you studied zoology, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you graduated university. What were you going to do?
I had no idea.
But your sister had an idea.
We were having a conversation about what I should do, and she said, I don't know. She said, you should go on TV like that Attenborough bloke. She said, all you've done is talk about wildlife for the last, 15 years. Bore the rest of the nation about it, I think was what she said. I didn't think much of it at the time. I just sort of thought, that's ridiculous. I don't even watch TV. I don't like TV, But then an opportunity arose, and I was so desperate for work, actually, that I thought, I'll try it.
What a noisy bunch! Anyway, a warm welcome from the studios here in Bristol for this edition of... Wow.
We've got some really neat animals, like this cuddly rough lemur here, who comes from an island of Madagascar off the south coast of Africa.
Well, I kind of generated an opportunity to work on a children's programme called The Really Wild Show, but I kind of did it without thinking about the repercussions, because I had no problem with the animals, of course, but the social side of it was... And I remember the hotel room that I sat in and thinking, I'm going to have to make this work.
Keep in mind, Chris had spent the last few years barely talking to anyone. Now he was on television with a live audience, co-presenters, and a huge production team. He confronted the problems he had interacting with people in the same methodical way he does everything. He made lists. What was on the lists?
Oh, all sorts of very simple things, like look at people when they talk to you, don't interrupt them.
Was it exhausting to have to keep thinking about these things while you were trying to work, thinking about don't interrupt people, thinking about look at them in the eyes, think about this is the way to interact?
Yeah, oh, very much so. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to do two jobs at once. I'm trying to manage myself and also make a TV program.
How did that
Please take the third exit from the roundabout in 300 yards onto A312.
More likely to go down. And yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know how they put up with me, to be honest with you.
But one relationship that has stuck is that with his current partner, Charlotte. They've been together for more than a decade. She lives a ferry ride away on the Isle of Wight and owns a zoo there, so they have their love of animals in common. Chris does visit her regularly, but perhaps not entirely for romantic reasons.
I like going to her house because she's got decent speed broadband. I've got nothing here, absolutely nothing. Might as well put a poster on a blackbird and shoo it out of the garden.
You say that there are practical reasons for you being apart, but does it also have to do with the fact that it's easier for you not to live with someone?
Probably, but that's not saying that I wouldn't try again to live with someone, with Charlotte. The one thing is I wouldn't want to do that at the expense of jeopardising the relationship. I'm so fortunate to have found her, and she is so understanding and tolerant of, in the main, sometimes she cracks when it just goes too far.
You'd think by now, given Chris's struggles communicating, he would have tried to figure out perhaps why day-to-day things that seemed so easy for other people were so difficult for him. But it wasn't until he had a devastating experience that he sought help. Before his beloved geriatric poodle Scratcher, Chris had other dogs. One called Itchy died of natural causes, but he had another that died in a much more traumatic way.
I had a dog that was run over. He was just over a year old, and so again there was no preparation for him dying. So he just got run over and died in my arms, and that was pretty much the most hideous thing. And it made me, it sort of slid into a hideous depression. At the time I was like suicidal. I had no reason to go on, and I wanted to understand why that was and how to not be in the same place again. So I had a course of psychotherapy, but off the back of that and through the discussions that had taken place, it really sort of consolidated in my mind that one of the factors was. So I thought at that point I'll go and get a diagnosis. So that's why I didn't get a diagnosis until I was in my 40s, and I wouldn't have even bothered if I hadn't have gone through. I imagine if I hadn't have gone through that course of psychotherapy.
What is Asperger's?
It defines part of a condition called autism spectrum disorder. So it's a spectrum condition. So although there's commonality in some of the traits with people with autism, we vary greatly. I think it's a useful means of collecting a group of people who have certain skills and attributes and face certain difficulties.
Like Chris says, Asperger's, which is on the autism spectrum, varies widely from person to person with the condition. But medically, people with Asperger's can have problems with social interaction and communication. They can find it hard to understand other people's emotions and feelings.
Now, take the third exit from the roundabout.
All things Chris could relate to.
And the diagnosis really just confirmed something which I'd realised a long time before. I think sometimes it's useful, but it's more useful for other people. I mean, to be honest with you, the other thing as well, at the time I was trying to concentrate on staying alive. So the Asperger's diagnosis was part of understanding why I was in that predicament.
How did you get through that period of depression?
I mean, ultimately, the reason that I'm alive is because of Itchy and Scratchy. They were dependent on me, and I couldn't leave them. And again, if I'm very honest with you, on those handful of occasions when I was very serious about it, I resented them being there. For all of my love for them, I actually resented them being there because they were controlling me. They had control over me. They were keeping me alive when I didn't want to be.
Route recalculation.
It didn't last very long. Got back to loving them.
You're a public figure in the UK. You've been on television for the last 3 decades, is it? And you're well known. Why did you decide to go public and tell people I have Asperger's?
I've been very fortunate to have been given a small voice because of my appearances on television and other things that I do. And I therefore think that morally, personally, if I don't exercise that voice...
Please turn left in 200 yards towards A40.
Discuss it.
Route recalculation.
and if we have a greater understanding of it, then we can build a better world for those people with it, because they don't need much, they just need a little to be able to live fulfilled lives like I have done.
Are you grateful for your Asperger's then?
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer. Had you asked me at any stage between 13 and 26, I would probably have said no. But now, I've recognised that there are certain small parts about me which I've been able to utilise for good, for my good, and hopefully for the wider good, and that it's provided me with skills which other people don't have.
Wildlife.
Please take the second exit from the roundabout in half a mile.
Part 2 of B.L. Sherrill's story. Don't miss it. Now on the BBC World Service Witness History with me, Rebecca Kesby. 2020 marks the 60th anniversary of Nigerian independence. Today we look back at the life of a leading figure in the fight for democracy, a pioneering feminist who galvanized local groups into powerful trades unions and inspired both women and men to build a new autonomous Nigeria, Margaret Ekpo.
I think she was like a natural leader that can bring women together naturally without too much effort, because they looked up to her.
Basi Ekpo is Margaret Ekpo's grandson. He lived with her as a child and remembers how her elegance, charm and flair for public speaking also impressed the men.
She had a way of getting the men to listen to her. She was a very beautiful lady. If you see her picture when she was younger, she was tall, elegant. A lot of men were captivated by her. I think maybe that must have helped to make them listen to her.
Margaret Ekpo was one of the first 2 women to be elected into political office in Nigeria.
Ed Emeka Kizo is a Nigerian historian who's written about Margaret Ekpo.
She represents to Nigeria the breaking of barriers. She was also the face of the possibilities that lay ahead.
Margaret Ekpo was born in 1914, the same year that various kingdoms and provinces were amalgamated into what became Nigeria under British colonial control. She was an intelligent child, but the untimely death of her father curtailed her academic potential. She still managed to become a teacher though, and it was in 1938 that she met her husband, Dr. John Ekpo, which would change the course of her life and thrust her into the world of anti-colonial politics.
Dr. Ekpo was a medical doctor. From what we read of him, he had a very strong political conscience, a very strong nationalist conscience. Because he was a civil servant, he was barred from political activity, but he encouraged his wife to attend political rallies, and to represent him. He certainly believed in his wife's intellectual ability, and he wanted to believe in traditional society, women were actually strong influences of political activity.
Margaret Ekpo used to say that the mechanisms of colonialism actually compounded the problems of Nigerian women. What does she mean by that?
Absolutely. Because, for instance, in Igbo land, women controlled the markets and actually were most liquid stakeholders in society. Men were more involved in farming. Women were the captains of commerce, could influence decisions at community level. By the time the colonial process were in place, that was because the new colonial process of government.
Please take the second exit from the roundabout in 300 yards onto B455.
The imposition of a British colonial hierarchy disturbed the existing systems of decision-making, as Ed says, reducing the influence of women. But it was the continuing economic strength and expertise of women that Margaret Ekpo could see had political potential. And in the early 50s, she began engaging local women, market traders and entrepreneurs in the southeastern city of Aba, where she lived.
She made them understand that, look, you may have had your role de-emphasized, but it is possible for you to fight, to influence political change, not just for your sake, but for society in general. She spoke to them in the language they understood, and she was authentic. She had an integrity that could not be impeached, because she made promises to them of what she would do on their behalf, and she never failed.
By 1954, she'd established the Aba Women's Association,
effectively a trades union. It became an organised and powerful bloc of activists, mobilising women to register to vote, so that in local elections in 1955, more women than men cast a ballot in ABBA.
Let's not forget the women had numbers. The women had vast numbers, and they were always going to vote for the party that she represented. She was the arrowhead, because she was the one out on the streets campaigning.
Ed, normally when we speak to people about the lives of great feminists,
now take the second exit from the roundabout.
Why are you personally such a fan of Margaret Ekpo?
You would have to blame my mother for that. My late mother was an extremely strong woman. I grew up with two older sisters, so I already had the socialization and understanding of the strength of women, particularly when it comes to the organization. And then, by virtue of my study as an historian, you read the impact of women through history, particularly studying traditional African society and the deliberate deprivation of women's participation and the denudation of their agency within society is one of the worst things that happened to our society in Africa, I should say, in colonial or post-colonial Africa. We lost a lot by having women removed from the controls, that balanced force of reasoning that women possess.
Bassi Ekpo also grew up in a house full of women. He, his mum and his three older sisters all lived with his grandmother, Margaret Ekpo, who had a profound influence on his worldview.
I admired her, and growing up with women all over the place made me to have a lot of respect for women. There's still a lot of discrimination against women in this part of the world. Most places, women are allowed to go to school. They are not even made to learn any trade that could keep them independent of the men. I don't agree with that, and I think they should be treated as equal to men.
Would you say that you were a feminist?
Yeah, I'm a feminist.
Nigeria is now indeed an independent, sovereign nation.
On October the 1st, 1960, Nigeria...
Please turn left in half a mile.
And there, the Nigerian flag of green and white and green has reached the top of the mast. Freedom, freedom, Nigeria.
In 1961, Margaret Ekpo was elected as an MP in the Eastern Regional Parliament. But in 1967, civil war broke out in Nigeria.
The bush country north of Enugu is now a landscape of dead villages. Houses have been broken into and burnt to the ground.
Margaret Ekpo was one of the local political leaders detained for 3 years by regional separatists. Her grandson Bassi says she was heartbroken by the fighting and disillusioned by what became Nigerian politics.
Please turn left in 300 yards onto A4127.
She lived through all the changes, the civil war, these military regimes. I don't think she was very pleased with the way the country turned out. But right now, there's a lot of corruption and all that. I don't think that was the vision, the dream that she and others had pre-independence.
After the Civil War ended in January 1970, Margaret Ekpo never returned to frontline politics, but years later, in 2001, Calabar Airport was renamed Margaret Ekpo International Airport in her honour.
I think to her, it demonstrated the appreciation for all her efforts, for all what she went through for the country. So she was very pleased. She was very emotional, and she was proud. And I think I was proud too.
Margaret Ekpo died in 2006 at the age of 92, but both Bassi and Ed hope some of her ideas and principles live on in future generations.
She'll be remembered as someone who likes freedom, opportunities for all. She never discriminated against anybody. She taught us to treat everybody with respect.
I think her role as a champion of the rights of women, she should be remembered for this. But then she should be remembered as a politician of conscience who worked and lived according to the courage of her convictions. She should be a role model for all African political thinkers and activists.
Bassi Ekpo and Ed Emeka Kizo on the life of Nigerian feminist Margaret Ekpo. They were both speaking to me, Rebecca Kesby, for Witness History.
This is the BBC World Service, where Owen Bennett-Jones speaks to trailblazing journalists in a special series of Assignment.
Hugh Sykes has reported for the BBC since the 1970s, often finding himself in the thick of the action.
Suddenly there's this explosion. It's a roadside bomb.
Join me as I talk to Hugh Sykes about the drama, danger and humour on the journalistic front line.
Assignment, Thursday at 14 and 19 GMT. And in 30 minutes, Sport Today with Maz Faruqi.
What's next for champions of Europe Bayern Munich and more importantly the runners-up Paris Saint-Germain? It's the trophy they wanted most, so how do they build again? And will head coach Thomas Tuchel be given time and money to do it?
That's after the newsroom on the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Now turn left. Route recalculation.
The leading Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny was poisoned. Germany calls on Russia to hold a full inquiry.
The suspicion is not that Mr. Navalny seriously poisoned himself, but that someone seriously poisoned Mr. Navalny, which unfortunately there are some examples of in recent Russian history.
Opposition activists in Belarus are arrested a day after vast anti-government rallies. Protests erupt in the US state of Wisconsin after police shoot a black man in the back multiple times.
We're tired of it. And right now, this is the wrong generation that this is happening to. The frustration is boiling to the top, and we're sick and tired.
And?
We were digging strips along the square. I saw something that looked like leaves. I wanted to clear them, but realized they might be coins.
An Israeli teenager discovers a trove of ancient gold coins. That's after this bulletin.
Hello, I'm Eileen McHugh with the BBC News. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel has called on Russia to investigate a chemical attack on the opposition leader Alexei Navalny to the last detail after the German clinic treating him said he'd been poisoned. Chancellor Merkel said the inquiry must identify and hold those responsible to account. The clinic said tests confirmed that a poison had disrupted the normal functioning of brain signals in Mr. Navalny's nerves.
Please take the first exit from the roundabout in half a mile.
Hospital, who've carried out an extensive examination of the Russian opposition figure, say he's still in an induced coma, but that while his condition is serious, it's not life-threatening. In a statement, they said clinical evidence had led them to believe the unknown substance belongs to a group of so-called cholinesterase inhibitors. Even before doctors determined the cause of Mr. Navalny's collapse, there was widespread suspicion of Russian involvement. And this evening, Angela Merkel demanded that the Russian authorities investigate the case with full transparency.
Security forces in Belarus have rounded up more prominent opposition members in a bid to end protests and strikes against President Lukashenko's.
Please take the first exit from the roundabout in 300 yards onto B456.
To arrange a transition of power. One has been remanded in custody. The head of the Council's board, the Nobel Literature Prize winner Svetlana Alexievich, is to be questioned on Wednesday. President Trump has addressed the Republican National Convention after it nominated him as the party's candidate for the presidential election. Delegates pledged to support him in a roll call vote. To chance of 4 more years.
Now take the first exit from the roundabout.
The significance of the poll in November.
We have to win. This is the most important election in the history of our country. This is the most, for a long period of time, I would say, well, 2016, how special was that evening? Was that one of the great? That was one of the great evenings. But we have to be very, very careful, and we have to win. Our country is counting on it.
Officials in Western India say dozens of people are thought to be trapped inside a multi-story apartment building which suddenly collapsed on Monday evening.
Please follow the road for 1.7 miles.
Town about 100 miles southwest of Mumbai. Police say there were around 45 flats in the 5-story residential building. Images of the collapse show corrugated tin sheets that appear to have been on the roof of the structure, lying amidst a pile of bricks and mud. Disaster response personnel are trying to reach people who are believed to be trapped beneath the rubble. It's unclear yet what might have caused the collapse. The area receives heavy rainfall during the monsoon season and is prone to flooding.
BBC News. Talks between West African mediators and the military men now running Mali have ended without a deal on how the country should return to civilian rule following last week's coup. A spokesman for the military said the final decision on any interim administration would be decided by Malians. The ECOWAS mediation team had insisted on ousted President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta being reinstated, but both sides said Mr. Keïta had indicated that he no longer wished to govern. Turkey has formally signalled that its navy will hold exercises off the Greek island of Crete on Tuesday. The authorities sent out a warning to ships in the area to steer clear. Athens reacted angrily last month when Ankara issued a similar advisory. Police in Brazil have charged a member of Congress, Flor-de-Lis de Souza, with ordering the execution of her husband. Pastor Anderson de Carmo was gunned down on the doorstep of their home in what he told the police at the time was a robbery. Alex Ritson reports.
Pastor de Carmo died in a hail of 30 bullets in June of 2019. But according to prosecutors, it was not his only brush with death. Police say he'd made several visits to hospital complaining of diarrhea, vomiting and sweating, and that they believe those visits were caused by someone putting arsenic in his food. While Flor-de-Lis de Souza has been charged with ordering his killing, there is currently no warrant for her arrest due to parliamentary immunity from prosecution. However, 11 other members of Ms. de Souza's family have been taken into custody on suspicion of also being involved.
The Ugandan authorities say more than 150 inmates and a warden at a rural prison in the north of the country have tested positive for coronavirus. The recently arrested inmates were tested while in quarantine before being transferred to the prison near the border with South Sudan. And that's the latest from BBC World Service News.
Welcome to the newsroom from the BBC World Service with me, Janat Jalil. German doctors have now come out to say what many suspected. Alexei Navalny was poisoned. Medical staff at a Berlin hospital have carried out extensive tests on the Russian opposition leader who remains in an induced coma. The German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, has now called on Russia to investigate the case, calling for full transparency and for those responsible to be held to account. Her spokesman, Stefan Seibert, spoke to reporters.
The suspicion is not that Mr. Navalny seriously poisoned himself, but that someone seriously poisoned Mr. Navalny, which unfortunately there are some examples of in recent Russian history. So the world takes this suspicion very seriously.
Initially, Russian doctors had refused to let Alexei Navalny leave the country after he fell suddenly ill last week, saying it was too dangerous for him to be moved. But his family and supporters said this was a delaying tactic to allow time for the poison in his system to disappear. Our correspondent in Berlin, Jenny Hill, told me more about what doctors know about it.
They believe it may belong to a group of what are described as cholinesterase inhibitors, and they've not given us very much detail, but they say there may be long-term consequences for his nervous system. So we can, I think, safely assume that this particular substance, whatever it was, may well have been targeted at his nervous system. Mr. Navalny himself is still in a coma. The doctors say he's in a serious condition, but that his condition isn't life-threatening, although they say at this stage they can't be certain that, as I say, he'll make a full recovery.
Do we know how they're treating him?
Well, now they've been able to identify the kind of substance that appears to have been administered, and they say they are giving him the antidote atropine, so they are now able to treat him. It's a really strange scenario. You go past this city centre hospital. Of course, there are patients outside as you get outside any kind of hospital. There's also policemen outside, and we're told there are policemen inside too. This morning, Angela Merkel's spokesman said, of course, this man needs protection, having been involved in what at the time was believed to have been a poisoning. That was before doctors gave us this confirmation. It is a very, very sensitive situation, of course, politically, and it's probably worth bearing in mind too that before the doctors released this statement, they said that they've been talking to Mr. Navalny's wife, who's been with him all along, and they say they've released the statement with her agreement because they believe it's in Mr. Navalny's interest that the world, in effect, knows what's happened to him.
And there does appear to be a pattern here. It is increasingly common for critics of Vladimir Putin to fall mysteriously ill or die. Where does this leave relations between Russia and the West?
Well, it further ratchets up the tensions. You mentioned sort of previous examples. 2 years ago, a Russian dissident was treated with suspected poisoning in the very same hospital here in Berlin. Last summer, a Chechen man, a dissident, an opposition to the Russian establishment, was shot dead in broad daylight in a Berlin park. The German authorities who investigated said, as far as they were concerned, this was a state-sponsored assassination.
Jenny Hill. And in the last hour, Russian health officials have said Mr. Navalny showed no signs of having been poisoned when he was admitted to the clinic in Siberia, and tests were carried out on him to check for a wide range of substances, including the inhibitors apparently identified by German doctors. The authorities in Belarus have moved to increase the pressure on opposition leaders who've been calling for President Alexander Lukashenko to step down after disputed elections. They've arrested 2 members of the Coordination Council, the group pushing for a transfer of power from the president to a new leader. Several organisers of the strikes that have hit the country in the wake of the poll have also been detained. The arrest took place a day after huge crowds defied police warnings to stage more protests. Our correspondent, Jonah Fisher, has been meeting opposition leaders in the capital, Minsk.
The Coordination Council's stated aim is to try to negotiate with President Lukashenko to facilitate a transfer of power, or failing that, push for new, free and fair elections. So far, despite 2 weeks of demonstrations and strikes across Belarus, there's no sign that the man who's run this country for the last 26 years is interested. Yesterday, President Lukashenko was filmed dressed for war and waving a machine gun as protesters neared his palace. Today, the authorities arrested 2 members of the Coordination Council and several of those involved in the strikes. Maria Kleshnikova is one of the council leaders and is calling for talks.
I think that our coordination committee is a good instrument to start this dialogue.
But it's a criminal case against it. Does it look likely that President Lukashenko will talk to you?
But we will try our best, and we will never give up and never stop to say that we are ready for a dialogue. And he have authorities, they have to hear the majority of Belarusian people.
For now, President Lukashenko's tactic appears to be to steadily ratchet up the pressure on those seen as leading the demonstrations and strikes. But with protests now entering their 3rd week, there's no sign of them losing momentum. Despite repeated attempts at intimidation, the tens of thousands taking part seem resolute and undeterred.
Jonah Fisher in Minsk. Several medical experts have questioned President Trump's decision to allow the emergency authorization of blood plasma treatments for COVID patients. The technique consists of so-called convalescent plasma being taken from people who've recovered from the disease, which has high levels of antibodies. This is then given to patients using a blood transfusion. The US Food and Drug Administration says the technique has already been applied to tens of thousands of Americans, and initial trials indicate it's safe. But British scientists aren't so sure. Our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, has this assessment.
In the US, around 60,000 plus patients have received convalescent plasma, but the trials have all been observational. So although Donald Trump said it cuts deaths by 35%, that is not shown in the data. There are indications that it may be helpful, and there's a great deal of optimism that convalescent plasma.
Please keep to the right in half a mile.
But the proof isn't there. And in the UK, there's a team at Oxford University that are conducting something called the recovery trials. They're testing a whole range of different treatments, and convalescent plasma is one of them. And they did a big randomized trial, and in the UK, 350 patients so far have joined on that trial. 10 times that number are needed to answer the simple question: do patients receive?
Please keep to the right in 300 yards onto A40.
Leading the trial at Oxford says the US approval is premature.
We really want this treatment to work. We think there's good reason why.
Now keep to the right.
That yet from the data which have been presented. So I think we need more data to show that it truly is effective, and also really importantly, before we start giving this treatment to tens or hundreds of thousands of people, we need data to show that it's safe.
Professor Richard Haynes.
Please follow the road for 3.5 miles.
Putin's arch critic Alexei Navalny. Authorities in Belarus have been detaining opposition activists and demonstrators a day after a massive street protest against President Lukashenko. Up to 80 people are feared trapped in the rubble of a large building that's collapsed near Mumbai in India, and the Republican National Convention has begun, where Donald Trump will be formally nominated as its candidate in November's presidential election.
Yes, last week the Democrats formally chose their candidate for president, Joe Biden. This week it's the turn of the Republicans, who have formally confirmed they want President Trump to stand for them again. He'll be making speeches every night of this week's convention as he tries to turn around the polls which show him badly trailing his Democratic rival. And a short time ago, Mr. Trump had this to say about the coronavirus pandemic to supporters in Charlotte, where the convention is now underway.
We saved millions and millions of lives. We learned the enemy. We learned all about the invisible enemy, how it affects really people that are older, especially older people, the elderly. And we learned, and most of the country is right now doing very, very well. They've done an incredible job. And by the way, when you shut it down, and we did the exact right thing, we shut it down, then we reopened, and that's what we're doing now. We're well into it. But if we didn't shut it down at that point, we would have had millions of people dead.
I asked our US correspondent Anthony Zerker what Donald Trump's strategy would be, given the criticism he's faced over his handling of the pandemic.
If you listen to the Republicans in the campaign, they say that he wants to paint an optimistic message during this week, that he wants to point to how good things were before the coronavirus pandemic hit, and suggest that that is what it's going to come back to that after the U.S. moves past the coronavirus. He wants to put these past few months kind of as an exception that will be smoothed over if he's elected to a second term. So he wants people to remember the good times, and he says he's the one to bring it back.
And he's describing these forthcoming elections as the most important in US history. A lot at stake here, because he's not just been criticized over his handling over the pandemic, but over the way he has presided over the unity of the nation, with the months of protests we've seen by Black Lives Matter activists.
Yeah, if you listen to the Democrats last week, they tried to make the case that Donald Trump was the wrong man for the moment, that he just wasn't up to the task, that he was too divisive, and that someone like Joe Biden, who they spent a lot of time building up as a nice guy and a caring person, empathetic, that he's the person who should be leading the country now and trying to bring everyone together, because these have been very hard times. I think what you're going to see tonight at the Republican National Convention is kind of a twofold strategy by the party that's going to play itself out over the next few months before the November election. You have Donald Trump Jr., Donald Trump's oldest son, speaking. He's going to throw red meat to the base to talk about how awful things would be with Joe Biden, the Democrats, saying that their policies would raise taxes and create more divisions in U.S. cities. And then you're going to see South Carolina Senator Tim Scott speak at the end of the evening. He's one of the few black people in the Senate, the only black Republican in the U.S. Senate. And he's going to make a pitch for a broader tent, going to talk about what Donald Trump has done as far as sentencing reform, criminal justice reform, and reach out to minority voters who, by and large, may feel left out from Donald Trump's first 3.5 years in office.
Anthony Zerker, what you're about to hear is extremely disturbing. It's the sound of a black man being shot repeatedly and in the back by police officers in the city of Kenosha in Wisconsin in the USA. The video shows police officers following the man, Jacob Black, with their guns drawn. As he opens his car door to get inside, they suddenly fire towards his back 7 times. As the video footage spread quickly online, violent protests erupted in the city. Officers fired tear gas at hundreds of protesters who'd marched from the police headquarters. This comes as the US has been rocked by months of protests over the police killing of George Floyd in May. Clyde McLemore is from the local Black Lives Matter group.
We're tired of it, right, McKean? We're tired of it. And right now, this is the wrong generation that this is happening to. The frustration is boiling to the top, and we're sick and tired.
Let's speak now to our correspondent, Barbara Usher. So, Barbara, what do we know about the circumstances that led up to this shooting?
Well, not very much. The police said only that they had responded to a domestic incident. One eyewitness told local media that Mr. Blake had been trying to stop a fight between two women, and his lawyer and just now the Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin, who's been speaking, both have said that he was trying to de-escalate a situation in his community. The Lieutenant Governor said that was the irony of the situation.
Because we have now had some reaction from state officials, I understand. What more can you tell us about that?
That's right. The Lieutenant Governor and the Governor spoke. The Lieutenant Governor, his language was quite stark, really. He said Jacob Blake was shot in the back 7 times in front of his children. This wasn't an accident. Officers intended to take a life in broad daylight. He talked about needing to take steps to deal with the white supremacy in our system. He said that they wanted to begin with a legislative package on police reform that he had put forward with the governor.
Please keep to the right in half a mile.
Said that the legislators should start to move on that package, and he called a special session of the legislature to take it up, and he basically accused the Republican leadership of having gone slow on it.
And incredibly, Mr. Blake survived. What do we know about his condition?
We understand from his family and friends that he has had surgery and he's in intensive care and that he is expected to survive, but no details about the extent of his injuries.
And there have already been protests over this death, the latest in a long line of protests over the deaths of unarmed black men at the hands of the police. The authorities have reacted.
Please keep to the right in 300 yards onto A40.
As you mentioned, there were protests. Hundreds of people marched on the police station.
Now please to the right.
They smashed windows. Police used tear gas to disperse them. As you said, quite familiar scenes, frankly, over the past weeks and months. The protesters said they were angry and frustrated that this type of thing was still happening, that black people were getting shot in police encounters, and it's something that Wisconsin has dealt with.
Please follow the road for 1.5 miles.
Place in the past 20 years in southeast Wisconsin.
Barbara, thank you. Barbara Usher there. Scientists in Hong Kong say they've documented the first confirmed case of reinfection with the coronavirus, which suggests that some people may lose the immunity to COVID-19 within only a few months after recovering from it. A 33-year-old man in Hong Kong was infected in April and tested positive again this month following a trip to Spain. Our health correspondent Richard Galpin reports.
Researchers at the University of Hong Kong found that the man became reinfected with the virus 4.5 months after originally contracting the disease. Using genome sequencing, they also established that the second episode of COVID-19 was, as they put it, clearly different from the first. It was not just a re-emergence of the original infection. This potentially has serious implications. It could mean that at least some people will not have long-lasting immunity from antibodies developed in response to contracting the virus. And that could undermine the ability of a vaccine to protect the population. But Dr. Maria van Kerkhove from the World Health Organization says other scientists following coronavirus patients have come to a different conclusion.
There are a number of studies underway following the same individuals over time. These are called longitudinal studies. From the longitudinal studies that are underway, not all of them are published yet, we do see a strong antibody response that stays at that same level.
The World Health Organization is warning against rushing to judgment, saying much more details needed before any firm conclusions on reinfection can be made.
Richard Galpin. More than 20 years ago in the northwest of England, 2 elderly...
Please keep to the right in half a mile.
A few years apart in the same town. In both instances, police determined the deaths to be murder-suicides, where the husband killed his wife before taking his own life. But now detectives are looking into whether a serial killer could have been behind these deaths, along with those of 3 other elderly couples in northwestern England. This follows a report by a senior coroner, Stephanie Davis, which has been seen by a team of journalists at the British newspaper The Sunday Times. Their editor, Jonathan Calvert, outlined the coroner's concerns about the deaths.
When she started looking at them, she started to see that they were more likely to be...
Please keep to the right in 300 yards onto A40.
Forensic cold case expert to have a look at them, and he concurred that these 2 cases were most likely to be both murders and that serious...
Now keep to the right.
Out of character. They're loving couples who've known each other for a long, long time, and then the level of violence is just shocking.
Please follow the road for 2.1 miles.
Really kind of does not match at all. These are people who didn't have any money worries. They've always been devoted. There's no history of psychiatric illness.
A former public prosecutor from the northwest of England, Nazir Afzal, said this report should be investigated thoroughly.
At its worst, what we have is a multiple murderer who may have killed more than 4 people during that period in the mid-90s. But there could be more. So we have to ensure that having police carry out a thorough investigation, that we're not dealing with a third party. But if they are dealing with a third party, that the investigation becomes live and that they bring this person to justice.
The local police force says it's reviewing the findings and has alerted other police forces where deaths have occurred. Now let's get some other stories from our news desk with Eileen.
Several Indonesian news websites critical of the country's response to the coronavirus pandemic have been hit by cyber attacks. In one case, the website of the magazine Tempo was replaced with a black screen and the word hoax printed across it in bold red font. It's not known who's behind the attacks, but the country's media union believe it's a deliberate attempt to stifle critical coverage. The Cuban capital Havana is bracing for the arrival of tropical storm Laura, which has already killed 12 people in Haiti and the Dominican Republic. From Havana, here's Will Grant.
Residents of the Cuban capital are making last-minute preparations for tropical storm Laura. They have due warning of what is coming. In Haiti, the storm left 9 people dead, including a 10-year-old girl, and another 3 were killed in the Dominican Republic. There's been flash flooding in Haiti too, as some residents were evacuated from their homes.
The large bow section of the Japanese tanker that leaked hundreds of tons of oil into the Indian Ocean has now been sunk off the coast of Mauritius. The Japanese-owned MV Wakashio ran aground last month. It then broke in 2 and part of the vessel is still stuck on a coral reef. The larger bow section was towed more than 20 kilometres to where the ocean is more than 3,000 metres deep. And the head of Denmark's intelligence agency has been suspended after it was revealed that the unit had broken laws. The Danish Defence Intelligence Service is said to have been spying on Danish citizens over the past 6 years. It's unclear if members of the public will ever be told if they were targeted and what information has been passed on.
Eileen, thank you. Archaeologists working on a dig in central Israel have found hundreds of gold coins in a clay jar that had been buried for more than 1,000 years. Experts say the rare find will help shed light on a little-known period in the area's past. With more, here's Alan Johnston.
The discovery was made by a teenage volunteer at the dig.
We were digging strips along the square, and when I removed the soil with a hoe, I saw something that looked like leaves. I wanted to clear them, but realised they might be coins. I looked down. At first I found about 3 of them, and when I picked them up, I saw some more underneath.
Eventually it became clear that 425 coins had been buried in a jar. They dated back to the era of the Abbasid Caliphate, which ruled the region from Persia to North Africa for centuries. In among the hoard there was even a coin from the neighbouring Byzantine Empire, which was a rival to the Caliphate. At the time when they were buried, the gold dinars would have been worth a small fortune, enough to buy a luxury home in a wealthy city. Who hid the cache of coins, and why they never came back to recover it, remains a mystery.
And that report was by Alan Johnston. A reminder of the main news this hour. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel has called on Russia to conduct a full investigation into what German doctors say was a poisoning of President Putin's arch critic Alexei Navalny. Thanks very much for listening to the newsroom. If you want to hear more from BBC World Service, you can go to our website and download our latest global news podcast.
Coming next today on the BBC World Service, it's Sport Today. Then in half an hour, why do we admire confidence?
Sometimes confidence can be very strong, like in the roaring 20s. People were more self-confident and bragging and boastful and extravagant.
Then it's discovery.
I'm Jim Al-Khalili. If you've ever seen the Northern Lights, you'll no doubt have been impressed by their colours and shifting patterns. Emma Bunce has seen them around Jupiter and has spent her career puzzling out how they're created.
And at 21 hours GMT, the former US Congresswoman, Katie Hill, is the guest on Hard Talk.
They were nude photos. The photos were published in the Daily Mail and all over the internet, and it ultimately led to my resignation.
That's all to come here on the BBC World Service.
This is Sport Today on the BBC World Service. On Monday's programme with me, Maz Faruqi, we'll be focusing on what's next for the European Champions League winners Bayern Munich and how runners-up Paris Saint-Germain move forward without the trophy they most want in their cabinet. And sport tends to throw up unlikely narratives, but the fairy tale run by Sofia Popov to become golf's Open champion is something special. All that and more to come after the latest.
Please keep to the right in half a mile.
BBC News with Eileen McHugh. Chancellor Merkel has called on Russia to investigate a chemical attack on the opposition leader Alexei Navalny after the German clinic treating him said he'd been poisoned. She said those responsible must be held accountable. Berlin's Charité Hospital said tests confirmed that a poison had disrupted the normal functioning of brain signals in Mr. Navalny's nervous system. Russian doctors have insisted their tests on toxins proved negative. Security forces in Belarus have rounded up more prominent opposition members in a bid to end protests against President Lukashenko's contentious re-election. They include 2 strike leaders and 3 members of the Coordination Council set up by the exiled figurehead Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. President Trump has addressed the Republican National Convention after it nominated him as the party's candidate for the presidential election.
Please keep to the right in 300 yards onto A501.
And claimed his opponents would try to manipulate the vote. It's feared dozens of people may be trapped in the rubble of a multi-storey building which collapsed in Raigad in western India. Heavy digging equipment and rescue dogs are at the scene. Talks between West African mediators and the military men now running Mali have ended without a deal on how the country should return to civilian rule following last week's coup. A military spokesman said the final decision on any interim administration would be decided by Malians. The large bow section of a Japanese tanker that leaked hundreds of tons of oil into the Indian Ocean has now been sunk off the coast of Mauritius. And a Brazilian congresswoman, Flor-de-Lis de Souza, has been charged with ordering the execution of her husband, who was shot more than 30 times last year. Detectives have asked Congress for Ms de Souza to be stripped of her parliamentary status. BBC News.
Now keep to the right.
And it's into the net! And that's been driven beautifully.
Serena Williams, Wimbledon champion, touchdown. Rebound James. How they get that precise left hook.
Live from the BBC World Service, this is Sport Today. Welcome along, thank you for joining us on the BBC World Service. Hello from me, Maz Faruqi, and Monday's Sport Today team. On the programme today, we'll hear from the 5-time Paralympic champion Hannah Cockcroft. 12 months out from the rescheduled Tokyo Games, she warns that a sport might struggle to recover because of the impact of the coronavirus pandemic.
Paralympians definitely have been hit hard because we already struggle to put on events, we already struggle to attract sponsors, attract crowds, and taking a whole year away from that kind of circuit, I think we might struggle to recover from that.
More from her later in the show, and we'll be celebrating a couple of milestones as well. Golf's world number 304, Sophia Popov, well, she's clinched the Women's Open title, and England cricketer James Anderson is already the most successful pace bowler in Test cricket history, but how much more can he achieve? But where else can we start? Last night in Lisbon, Bayern Munich won European club football's biggest prize.
Kimmich now crosses to the back post, header is in! It's there! Bayern take the lead through Kingsley Coman, and the Frenchman in the German champions team has given Bayern the lead in the Champions League final. A close range header from an angle. It's PSG 0, Bayern Munich 1.
Yes, a header from their former player Kingsley Coman was the difference as Bayern Munich beat Paris Saint-Germain 1-0 to lift a 6th European title. In a moment, we'll explore where PSG go from here, but we have to start with Bayern. Journalist Taufik Khalil was one of the lucky few to be able to watch these games firsthand in Lisbon, and he joins us on Sports Day. Congratulations, Taufik. You predicted a win for Bayern, but you thought there might be a few more goals. Are you happy enough?
Well, I'm absolutely happy enough. Well, I was pretty sure that it will be a close game, and when I predicted a 3-1, I really was thinking that Bayern would be in the lead close to the finish with 1 goal and then maybe score another when Paris opens. But Paris really never opened. Bayern only was leading by 1, and so in the final, in the final stage of the second half, I was really disappointed that there was coming so little from Paris.
We talked about Hansi Flick and the fact that he's only had the top job at Bayern Munich for about 9 months. What an amazing achievement then to win a treble so quickly.
He came in as an assistant coach last summer. He took over in November. The club refused to give him a long-time contract. They said, okay, only go until Christmas. Then Christmas they say, okay, only go until the end of the season. Then season gets better, so they said, okay, you can get a little longer. Now he wins a treble. I think there are a lot of reasons for that. Because first of all, he has an excellent idea of playing offensive football. He calls that Bayern Munich style football. The people are expecting, the fans are expecting offensive, beautiful football of Bayern Munich. Niko Kovac intended to play more defensive style. Second, he brought Thomas Müller, the heart of Bayern Munich, back to the team. And third, it's his empathy. It's his way of dealing with the players, of listening to their problems, of having an ear and an eye for each and every one. Last night, he was not celebrating in the first moment. He was taking care of on Neymar. He hugged him. He tried to dry his tears. So this is typical for Hansi Flick.
Do you think he'll be given money resources to try and make this Bayern team even better?
I think there is no need of that. Okay, Thiago will go. We know that. He might go to England. I think it's a matter of hours or days when they will announce it. Coutinho will go. He will go to back to Barcelona. What's going on with David Alaba? Nobody knows. Maybe David knows. I think he will stay now because he sees a future with that team. Because it's not that there is a big need for Bayern Munich to buy new players. They have pretty much players. They have pretty much young players, and they just bought Nyonzu from France, and they just bought a guy, German national player, played at Manchester City, now going to Bayern Munich. That's what they call the king transfer, Leroy Sané. So that's something they really looking forward into the bright future. Lewandowski will play some more years. All these players will play some more years. And then you have young guys and some players coming out of the academy. I actually see a very good future because Hansi Flick, what he's doing very well, and he did that at the German Football Association, he can develop young players. I met him several times watching a Sunday after a Saturday match of the professionals. I met him Sunday afternoon in the 3rd division, just being there, just having an eye on the young players.
It's a scary prospect, isn't it, with the likes of Leroy Sané joining next season. Thank you, Taufik, so much for joining us on Sport Today.
Thank you very much.
Those are thoughts then of journalist Taufik Khalil. Sorry about the car alarm in the background there as well, but things couldn't be better in the Bayern camp at the moment, as we heard. But what's next for PSG? The team were completely dominant domestically again this season, but the one trophy they really want,
That's eluded them again. Boss Thomas Tuchel is trying, though, to find the positives despite defeat. Let's have a listen.
Oui, je suis très fier. Yes, I'm very proud. I've already told the team that. It's always the worst feeling in the world to lose a final like that, but I lost the final with two teams that really deserved to be in the final. We ran with a lot of intensity, mentality. We had a lot of quality. We've gone on this run together as a team. I think there's always been a great mood in the camp, and that has always given us the opportunity to win 4 pieces of silverware. We had every chance of winning the trophy tonight. There were just fine margins which were missing, perhaps a little bit of luck, a cutting edge perhaps. Once again,
Traffic jam ahead on A501 between Pentonville Road, A201 and Angel, Islington, A1.
French football journalist Sarah Menai was watching the final from Paris. She's here with us live on Sports Day now. Sarah, commiserations. I'm sorry it wasn't the result that you wanted.
Hi, Mas. No, it was not the result we wanted, of course, in Paris. There is a feeling of sadness. There was this morning, this feeling of sadness, of disappointment. We were not expecting this kind of final. We were expecting a lot of goals. We were expecting Neymar and Mbappe to be very good last night. They weren't, and they lost against a better team.
Why do you think Mbappe and Neymar weren't at their best? Do you think nerves played their part, or do you think Bayern just got their tactics right on the night?
Both, I think. Both. I think nerves were of course, like, it was too complicated for them, I think, last night, and we saw Bayern playing very well also. So it was. I think we couldn't do anything last night. Actually, they couldn't do anything against this team. Bayern was very good. Manuel Neuer was very good last night, and I think there was a lot of pressure. The pressure was on Paris. It was a historical final for them. They really wanted to win it. They really wanted to lift the trophy, and maybe too much pressure on them.
What do you think then is going to be the future for some of those big players? Because we talked previously ahead of this final in the World Service about Neymar and Mbappe, and that they might leave with PSG at the top, you know, as the kings of Europe if they were to win. That's not the case. So what do you think is going to happen? Are they going to stay and try and win it again next season? Where do you see their future?
Yeah, they will. I think they will stay, both of them. I think Neymar and Mbappe will stay in Paris next season. We'll see next summer. For now, they will try to win it again. They will dominate, as you said, in the domestic league. No problem with that. But apparently there was a lot of sadness this morning in their hotel in Lisbon, because some players are going to leave. Thiago Silva is leaving after 8 years at Paris. It was his last game last night with Paris. Choupo-Moting is going to leave. Some players are going to leave, but for Neymar and Mbappe, no, they will stay at least one more season and try to win it next year, and then we'll see. But for now, no, I think they will stay.
There was also speculation around the head coach Thomas Tuchel, isn't there? He was asked about his future as well after the final. Here's what he said.
schön, das werden wir. We'll see. It's not always the head coach's decision.
Please keep to the left in half a mile.
About how to rebuild the team, how we can strengthen the squad because we need fresh blood. We need more quality in the side to make sure we can maintain this level, to show that we're not going to drop off, that we will keep moving forward, and this is only the start. We haven't reached the top of the mountain. That's the most important thing as opposed to my contract. So we can talk about all of that once we built the team and once everyone is on the same page as to the sort of game that we want to play.
Sarah, listening to Tuchel there, he's saying this is just the start. Do you think he's going to be given the time and the money to try and make this team even stronger?
He already has the money. Qatar spent €1 billion in this team. He has the money. He's gonna be given some time. I think maybe one more season. They cannot let him go now, as he qualified Paris for this historic final. He will maybe stay one more season. We'll see next year what happens in the Champions League. They didn't bring Thomas Tuchel to win the domestic competition. They're gonna win it anyway. I mean, it's Tuchel or anyone else, they'll win it. They really have him to win the Champions League. So we'll see next year. We already have some names, like maybe Massimiliano Allegri, maybe Pochettino could come to Paris. We'll see. for now, I think he will stay next season. We'll see if they go, if they reach the final again or not. But he kind of saved his place by qualifying Paris for his final. If they were out in the quarter, or maybe he would have been sacked. But now, no, they're in final, so they were in final, so he will stay, I think, one more year, and maybe next year, if they don't reach the semi or the final, maybe he will leave. But for now, I think Thomas Tuchel will stay in Paris.
I have to ask you, Sarah, about some of the scenes that our listeners might have seen outside the Parc des Princes in Paris last night. We know 5,000 fans were let into the stadium to watch the game, but then a small minority of them clashed afterwards outside with police. It's a shame, isn't it, really, to have that image as one of the final ones we have of this season for Paris Saint-Germain, because it was such an impressive run to get to that final.
It's a shame, as you said, it's a shame.
Please keep to the left in 300 yards onto A501.
People were arrested when fans clashed with riot police on the Champs-Élysées. And now, today, fans were not allowed to go near the stadium, near the Parc des Princes to welcome the team. Security measures have been taken by local authorities because they don't want those clashes to happen again, those riots. So yeah,
now keep to the left.
Final, it's historical. They had a really good journey in this Champions League. We should just be celebrating, be proud of them, and not be just clashing with police. And it was a really, to be honest, it was a really weird night in Paris yesterday. A lot of sadness, a lot of anger. We don't know why. I mean, out of nowhere, a lot of disappointment. It was useless. And now today they cannot go near the Parc des Princes. They are like limited. There's like a limited area where they can't go today, because of what happened last night, and it's really a shame.
It is a shame for the season to end like that, isn't it? But it was such a fantastic season for PSG, their first final, as you say, and hopefully we'll speak again on another European run next season. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us on Sport Today.
Please keep to the left in half a mile.
Joining us on Sport Today. Live from the BBC World Service, this is Sport Today. Right, to a brilliant story from the world of golf. Sophia Popov, a player ranked outside of the top 300, who until just a few weeks ago hadn't qualified to play LPGA events. Well, today she is celebrating her first major win. The 27-year-old German shot a 368 to clinch the Women's Open, her first ever win on either the LPGA or the Ladies European Tour. After her victory, Popov admitted that she almost quit the sport last year.
It feels amazing. There's a lot of hard work behind it, and a lot of struggles that I went through the last 6 years, especially health-wise. And I'm just glad I was able to overcome everything and, keep my head in it. I almost quit playing last year, so thank God I didn't.
Yes, Sophia Popov, clearly very emotional there, but congratulations to her on an incredible performance at Royal Troon, which was watched by very few inside the secure bio-bubble environment of the course. But our golf correspondent Ian Carter, who is with me now, he was one of them. Ian, a whole range of feelings must have overwhelmed Sophia Popov, understandably, after she secured that maiden major. Just explain to our listeners what a surprise it was that she was able to do this. She wasn't a name, was she, mentioned at all in the build-up, and she suffered with her fair share of health problems as well.
No, that's right. She only revealed publicly that she'd been suffering from Lyme disease, which is especially debilitating. Those were the health issues that she mentioned there in her victory speech. Those tears had started before she'd hold out on the 18th green. It was a brilliant performance, but as you say, Maz, it was something that none of us could have anticipated. She came into this Women's Open ranked 304 in the world, 100-1 shot. The backstory is remarkable. She missed out on having an LPGA card at qualifying school by just a single shot. When golf actually came back after the 5-month hiatus, she got onto the LPGA, but as a caddy for Anne van Dam, who's a very good friend of hers. Then, because not too many players felt able to move to Toledo for the marathon tournament there, she managed to get a start in that, finished in the top 10, finishing 9th. That got her into the field for the Women's Open.
Please keep to the left in 300 yards onto A501.
As you say, on the Satellite Cactus Tour, does this result show the sport that there are potentially
some really exciting players, some really talented players, just on that level below, just outside the LPGA, who could really make that step up.
Now keep to the left.
Show the strength and depth, just how good a golfer you have to be to play professionally at any level. And I asked her about it in the news conference last night, and just saying, you know, how much inspiration could this give to any number of players at any level of the game? And she said absolutely. You know, she has lots of friends on the FIDE Symetra Tour who will look at this and say, well, I score similarly to Sophia, so look what she's done, maybe I can do it. And it will, I think, you know,
please take the first exit from the roundabout in half a mile, then keep to the right.
And I think that's one of the great strengths of golf. Yes, you do have that elite clutch of players who more often than not are contending for the biggest prizes, but if it's your week and you've put the work in and it all falls into place, then you can go and challenge and you can win. And to win over 72 holes, I firmly believe there are no flukes as far as that's concerned. This was a brilliant performance and a thoroughly deserved victory.
It was. Congratulations again to Sophia Popov and to our golf correspondent Ian Carter. Now, 12 months out from the rescheduled Tokyo Games, the International Paralympic Committee President Andrew Parsons has told the BBC that no nation will miss the now 2021 Paralympics for financial reasons. The Games, which were scheduled to start this week, are now due to begin on August the 24th next year. Financial fears arising from the coronavirus pandemic have cast a cloud over the parasport movement. Andrew Parsons says, though, that it's the bigger national Paralympic committees who need the most help right now.
Funny enough, I think the most sophisticated FPCs are the ones really suffering now because they have different revenue streams coming from commercial, broadcasting, and so. The smaller national Paralympic committees that they only rely on government support, they're having more, let's say, stability when it comes to the financial resources coming in. We're developing strategies and we have some plans with commercial partners, some plans with governments, and also with the support of the 2020 Organizing Committee is to avoid at all costs that a nation cannot compete at the Paralympic Games because of the financial situation, that they cannot even afford to get there.
Let's get more on this with our parasport reporter Ed Harry, who's covered 3 summer and 1 winter Paralympics for the BBC. Hello Ed, finance is a huge part of this, isn't it, as we know, but so...
Please take the first exit from the roundabout in 300 yards onto A5201, then keep to the right.
On para-athletes' ability to train, let alone compete. Some para-athletes are in high-risk groups as far as the virus is concerned, but without championships, without competitions, the funding stream has dried up for individuals, and as Andrew Parsons said there, it's dried up for national Paralympic committees as well. So has parasport been more affected by the pandemic than most other sports? Here's the 5 times Paralympic gold medalist, multiple world champion and world record holder Hannah Cockcroft.
It's hit everyone hard, so I'm not saying us more than everyday people, but I think in sport, Paralympians definitely have been hit hard because we already struggle to put on events, we already struggle to attract sponsors, attract crowds, and taking a whole year away from that kind of circuit, I think we might struggle to recover from that. I guess like everyone again, so many questions around, you know, are my sponsors going to hang around? I would still compete if it was definitely safe and it just meant no crowds, then I would definitely compete, but ultimately another part of me would think, well, if it's not safe to let, you know, thousands of people come and watch, is it safe for thousands of athletes to be together in a village or in a competition ground? Probably not. So then I would have to ask questions as to whether we should be competing at all. Ultimately, I am a person at risk, you know, I didn't get a letter or anything, but I've got a disability, and that does mean that unfortunately I am going to catch things a bit quicker, so you have to be a little bit more careful, a little bit more cautious, and yeah, hopefully that doesn't mean throwing away my dreams, but we'll just have to see what happens.
That's wheelchair racer Hannah Cockcroft. Ed Harry is still with me. Wheelchair basketball, Ed, is a sport which many were looking forward to watching at the Games in Tokyo. It's a brilliant sport to watch, but it's also one where the global governing body and the IPC are clashing somewhat, aren't they? And that's been highlighted again today.
Yeah, by way of background, the IPC is directly in charge of some of its sports, like athletics, like swimming, but with others, like wheelchair basketball, that's got its own global governing body. And at the start of this year, the IPC told wheelchair basketball it needed to change its classification regulations. A wheelchair basketball team features players with greater and lesser degrees of impairment. The IPC wanted those in the least impaired categories to be reclassified, and if they weren't, then the sport was facing exclusion from the Paralympics as early as Tokyo if it had gone ahead this year. And this reclassification process, what might it do? Well, in some cases it will mean players being told, you no longer qualify to play this sport bluntly, and players in this bracket have told the BBC this, they would suddenly be classified as not sufficiently disabled to be eligible for selection. What's happened today is a body called Global Athletes, set up last year to act as kind of a union, a pressure group, a support for all sports people. They've written an open letter saying that telling individuals who help their countries qualify for Tokyo that they now won't be allowed to compete in the games is wrong, and that classification qualifiers shouldn't be thrown out now. Global Athlete believes the legality of doing that could and should be challenged, and they say if the IPC is unhappy with the International Wheelchair Basketball Federation, then they, the IPC, should take action against the federation rather than against the athletes themselves.
So what's the response been to that open letter from the International Paralympic Committee then?
They've given me a statement today. It says the IPC's athlete classification code was approved overwhelmingly in November of 2015, so getting on for 5 years ago. No sport is above the rules, they say, and in January of this year, the IPC's frustration with wheelchair basketball reached a breaking point. That option did exist to exclude the sport from Tokyo or suspend its membership of the IPC. Instead, the IPC asked wheelchair basketball to verify that each player in those categories I outlined, Maz, has an eligible impairment.
Now take the first exit from the roundabout.
8 existing wheelchair basketball players have been found not to have an eligible impairment to compete in parasport, and wheelchair basketball under its own rules has found 1 existing player also not eligible.
Okay, thank you, Ed. That's the BBC's Ed Harry joining me live on Sport Today.
Sport Today from the BBC World Service.
Finally, on Monday's programme, let's focus on men's cricket, because with 1 day of Test cricket left to be played here in England this European summer, the all-time leading Test wicket taker as a pace bowler, James Anderson, will step out on day 5 of the 3rd and final Test against Pakistan with a chance to reach a historical milestone of 600 wickets in the form of the game. Bad light and poor weather today on day 4 in Southampton means Anderson is 1 short of the landmark, with England...
Please keep to the right in 100 yards onto A5201. Now keep to the right.
So England and James Anderson frustrated on the 4th day here in Southampton. 599 Test wickets for the England fast bowler. He stands on the brink of history, but bad light stopped play just as it looked as though he was building the pressure that would allow him to reach that milestone. Pakistan 100 for 2 in their second innings. They trail by 210 runs. With me, the former England spinner Phil Tufnell, and whatever way you look at it, 599 wickets, 600 wickets, James Anderson is a phenomenal athlete and a phenomenal cricketer.
It's just tantalising, isn't it? He'll be lying in his bed tonight thinking about that 1 wicket. He's been an absolutely world-class performer for England over so many years now. I've seen him from the commentary box running in for England. Beautiful pitch-up, swinging deliveries. He's a master of his craft, isn't he? But then just 1 away. Will he get it tomorrow? Fingers crossed.
Well, the big question is, will the weather play ball? You might be able to hear in the background the noise of the hover cover just covering that pitch. We're expecting a lot of rain tonight, and so not only the question of whether he can get the wicket on the field, it's whether he'll even get on the field to have the opportunity.
Well, I mean, we've all got everything crossed for him, haven't we? As you say, 600 Test wickets, absolutely magnificent servant for English cricket, really. So yeah, there is a lot of rain around, but hopefully there will be a little bit of a break in the clouds after about 2-3 o'clock, hopefully, and he can go out there tomorrow and make history.
Pakistan will know that they've got an opportunity potentially here of saving the game, valuable ICC Test Championship points as well. 8 wickets in hand. England need those 8. What have you seen from the pitch to suggest where this game might go?
Well, I think Pakistan are in a good position. As you say, we're going to lose some time to rain in the morning. Pakistan have played very, very well there. Abid and Azhar Ali looking in good touch, and with the Babar Azam at the crease now, we've got some world-class batting to get through. But England will be hoping for a couple of lucky breaks. But when the rain is about, as a batting side, it just focuses the mind, and you can see a light at the end of the tunnel, so it's going to be nip and tuck.
James Anderson on the brink of history. England hoping for 8 wickets to make it a 2-0 series win. Pakistan, meanwhile, well, they've got their minds focused on saving the game, and whatever play we do get tomorrow, well, it'll come down to 8 Pakistan wickets, and for James Anderson, he needs one of them to become the 600 man.
He does indeed. Thank you, Henry, and the former England bowler Phil Tufnell with him as well. That's all we have time for on Monday Sport today. We're back at the same time tomorrow, so join us then. Bye for now.
Sport Today is a BBC Sport production for the BBC World Service.
This is the BBC World Service, and as part of our Rule Breakers series, we're on the railway tracks.
In America exists a secret and sacred map. You can't buy it in any store or download it online. If you have a copy, you can travel from one end of the country to the other, all by freight train. The man behind the map, a 72-year-old Vietnam veteran known as Train Doc.
Veteran on the tracks, Wednesday at 15:30 and 21:30 GMT. And in 30 minutes, it's Discovery.
I'm Jim Al-Khalili. If you've ever seen the Northern Lights, you'll no doubt have been impressed by their colours and shifting patterns. Emma Bunce has seen them around Jupiter and has spent her career puzzling out how they're created.
On air, online, and on mobile, this is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Last week in the Y Factor, we idea of confidence with a body blow.
One of the most consistent findings in the whole of psychology is that there is very little overlap between how good people think they are at something and how good they actually are.
Confidence, we found, is treacherous, but not so fast. This week, a counter view.
Turns out if you're a little bit overconfident, you see yourself in a more positive light than warranted. That's actually really good for your health and motivation and getting off the couch and trying new things.
So how do we judge when confidence is good and when it's bad? Some answers might surprise you.
There are many benefits to being slightly underconfident. People who are exceptional achievers in any field tend to be their own worst critics and are less confident than they should vis-a-vis their actual talents.
I'm Michael Blaston, and in this week's Y Factor on BBC World Service, we ask, why do we admire confidence? Join me after the news.
I'm Stuart McIntosh with the BBC News. Hello. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel has called on Russia to investigate a chemical attack on the opposition leader Alexei Navalny after the German clinic treating him said he'd been poisoned. It said tests confirmed that a toxin had disrupted the normal functioning of brain signals in Mr. Navalny's nervous system. Jenny Hill reports.
Doctors at Berlin's Charité Hospital, who've carried out an extensive examination of the Russian opposition figure, say he's still in an induced coma, but that while his condition is serious, it's not life-threatening. In a statement, they said clinical evidence had led them to believe the unknown substance belongs to a group of so-called cholinesterase inhibitors. Even before doctors determined the cause of Mr. Navalny's collapse, there was widespread suspicion of Russian involvement. And this evening, Angela Merkel demanded that the Russian authorities investigate the case with full transparency.
Security forces in Belarus have rounded up prominent opposition members in a bid to end protests and strikes against President Lukashenko's contentious re-election. They include 2 strike leaders and 3 members of the Opposition Coordination Council. Our correspondent Jonah Fisher reports from Minsk.
The Coordination Council's stated aim is to try to negotiate with President Lukashenko to facilitate a transfer of power, or failing that, push for new, free and fair elections.
Please keep to the left in half a mile.
Strikes across Belarus, there's no sign that the man who's run this country for the last 26 years is interested. Today, the authorities arrested members of the Coordination Council and several of those involved in the strikes.
President Trump has addressed the Republican National Convention after it nominated him as the party's candidate for the presidential election. To chants of 4 more years, Mr. Trump spoke about his achievements and claimed his opponents would try to manipulate the vote. He went on to defend his much-criticized handling of the coronavirus pandemic.
We saved millions and millions of lives. We learned the enemy. We learned all about the invisible enemy, how it affects really people that are older, especially older people, the elderly. And we learned, and most of the country is right now doing very, very well. They've done an incredible job.
New York's State Attorney General has asked a court to enforce subpoenas in an investigation into whether President Trump and his businesses inflated assets on financial statements to secure loans and economic and tax benefits. The petition names the Trump Organization an umbrella group for the president's holdings. It also names the president's son Eric and Seven Springs, a New York estate owned by the Trump family. Lawyers for the Trump Organization and Eric Trump have not commented. World News from the BBC. Emergency rescue teams are trying to reach dozens of people who are trapped under a collapsed residential building in the Indian state of Maharashtra. The 5-story block, which housed more than 40 flats, is in Nahad, several hours' drive from Mumbai. Heavy digging equipment and rescue dogs are at the scene. Police in Brazil have charged a member of Congress, Flores de Souza, with ordering the execution of her husband. Pastor Anderson de Carmo was gunned down on the doorstep of their home in what she told the police was a robbery. Alex Ritson reports. Pastor de Carmo died in a hail of 30 bullets in June of 2019. But according to prosecutors, it was not his only brush with death. Police say he'd made several visits to hospital complaining of diarrhea, vomiting and sweating, and that they believe those visits were caused by someone putting arsenic in his food. While Flores de Souza has been charged with ordering his killing, there is currently no warrant for her arrest due to parliamentary immunity from prosecution. However, 11 other members of Ms. de Souza's family have been taken into custody on suspicion of also being involved. Algeria's President Abdelmajid Tebboune has announced that a referendum on a new constitution will be held in just over 2 months on November the 1st. A draft of the proposed constitution released earlier this year indicated that it would give Algeria's parliament and the Prime Minister's office more power. There have been many months of pressure for reform in Algeria. A Somali court has sentenced the Director General of the Ministry of Health to 9 years in prison after finding him guilty of misappropriating funds meant for the fight against coronavirus. Abdali Hashi Ali was also fined $2,000. State radio said several other officials were given various prison terms, the longest being 18 years. BBC News.
Last week's Y Factor was all about confidence. If you heard it, maybe like me, you were struck by this.
One of the most consistent findings in the whole of psychology is that there is actually very little overlap between how good people think they are at something and how good they actually are.
Which is another way of saying that
in a lot of domains, the correlation between a person's confidence and their performance is essentially zero.
Zero. Confidence alone tells us nothing reliable about competence. Why not? Because
the least competent people are often the most confident because they don't know what they don't know.
Which all adds up to a big problem for the whole idea.
Please keep to the left in 300 yards onto A1202.
Become more and more confident, and yet that has no bearing whatsoever on how correct they are.
Until by the end of that program last week, I began to wonder if confidence, which many of us drill into our kids, admire, desire for ourselves, if maybe it needs taking down a peg or two, along with our respect for it, as something we simply can't trust. But that was the argument last week, because of course there's another side to confidence. You're listening to the Y Factor on the BBC World Service, and I'm Michael Blastland. In this week's programme, we continue to ask, why do we admire confidence? But this time we're looking at the positives. Moments when confidence
now keep to the left.
Death, at how other people's bullishness can be good for us, even if it's at risk of being conned. And, above all, at how to sift the good in confidence from the bad. We're at Hyde Park.
Please turn left in 300 yards onto A1203.
Speed. Josephine Berry, who's also a keen triathlete. So what are you riding?
Oh, this is just my commute bike. So
This is your commute bike. Do you have a road bike?
I have 6 bikes.
You have 6 bikes?
Yeah.
Envy. Confidence, we've been hearing, can be a dangerous, deceptive thing. But to an athlete, can it be vital?
Completely. So I guess all sports psychology researchers are trying to find what that magic thing is that really helps an athlete perform above everybody else. And when they've looked at what traits or characteristics might differentiate people, the strongest one that comes out is confidence.
In which direction? More is better?
Yes, so we look at confidence as like rose-tinted glasses. And if you can put those rose-tinted glasses on, and the higher your confidence is, the more you're able to see things through that positive mindset. The more we see things as to what we can achieve, rather than seeing things as a threat.
Confidence and even overconfidence, historically in the psychological literature, has been often described as a positive thing.
Ed O'Brien, a psychologist from the University of Chicago, who takes the idea beyond sport.
So there's a concept in psychology called positive illusions, and this describes people's connections between how they view themselves and things like health outcomes. And it turns out if you're a little bit overconfident, you see yourself in a more positive light than warranted. That's actually really good for your health and motivation, and you're getting off the couch and you're trying new things. There's obviously lots of benefits for being inspired to get off the couch and try things.
Motivation and health sound like reasons enough to seek confidence. Might it also be the making of your career? Business is risky. Most new businesses fail. You could conclude that this means most entrepreneurs are riskily overconfident. But even that, it can be argued, can be beneficial, if not always for them. Don Moore from the University of Berkeley in California researches confidence and overconfidence in business.
I am entirely sympathetic to that argument, and I am grateful that so many overconfident and reckless young entrepreneurs start businesses. I certainly know my home state of California has benefited disproportionately from entrepreneurial activity. But that's a distinctly separate question from whether I would advise an entrepreneur that they should delude themselves about their chances for success, such that they invest more than they're likely to get out of some business, or that they quit a lucrative day job in order to start a new company that is most likely going to fail. To draw an analogy, I would say it's something like lottery tickets. So if you've deluded yourself about the probability of winning the lottery, you'll be more interested in buying lottery tickets than you should be.
In fact, the whole economy, many say, runs on confidence. Robert Shiller, a Nobel Prize-winning economist.
Definitely that is the culture, to think of it as a virtue. There is a sense afloat that it's good that people are confident, because then they'll spend money. It will be a self-fulfilling prophecy. We have to have confidence in the economy if the economy is going to do well. So it's rare that people criticize overconfidence.
Altogether, a good thing in economics then, though admittedly a little volatile.
Sometimes confidence can be very strong, like in the Roaring 20s. People were more self-confident and bragging and boastful and extravagant. And then we have the 1930s, the Great Depression, in which people really started assuming the worst en masse.
That volatility makes confidence a curious commodity. It implies that we don't really know at any moment how much of it we should feel, and might abruptly lose it. Maybe that's why it's so prized, fragile, vulnerable, but maybe essential. Another case of that is in medicine. Anne McGuinness, a consultant in emergency medicine, says that if you didn't have at least some, you couldn't begin to do the job. She's seen that happen.
I certainly have. People come through the emergency department often. They used to come for 6 months quite early in their career. And I remember clearly a couple who simply couldn't take the uncertainty. And one I can think of was a very, very bright young lady. And it was clear after about 3 weeks in the job that she simply could not deal with the uncertainty. She would see about 1 or 2 patients per shift. And I said, you have to let people go. It might be a virus, it might be a flu, but it's not pneumonia. She couldn't deal with examining a patient and writing down the findings and sending them away. She wanted to scan everybody that had a headache and do everything all day to people to be certain. So after a few weeks in the job, she had to resign. And we tried to support her and give her lots of tools and backup, but she couldn't. She would never have been able to do a night shift.
Doctors have to make decisions. often fast, often under pressure, often uncertain. But they couldn't put a knife in a patient if they didn't have at least some confidence. The patient would run a mile too. One last argument in its favour. It comes from Maria Konnikova, the writer who told us so many stories about the con in confidence, the confidence tricksters whose own self-assurance invites our own. If you expected anyone to be sceptical of it, it'd be Maria. But even she says there can be virtue in believing what people say about themselves. Why would we?
Now turn left.
Evolutionarily, there are lots of reasons why we do believe them, and the most fundamental one is that on average people are telling the truth.
Please follow the road for 1.6 miles.
People aren't out to deceive you. So if someone says, oh, there's something wrong with your phone, I happen to be an engineer and I know exactly how phones work, why don't you hand it to me, I'll fix it. You'll say, oh, okay, great, because most of the time they are an expert and they're not going to be trying to put malware on your phone. And so the one time out of 100 that it is a con artist, we end up falling for it. And it ends up, when you look at the research, that trust is actually evolutionarily advantageous. So we tend to trust people because it gets us ahead in life. Societies are built on trust, and we see over and over that societies on a social level with higher levels of generalized trust, which is trust in your fellow human beings, they have better social institutions, they're more advanced economically, they end up scoring better on all sorts of measures. And on a personal level, people who have high levels of trust tend to be more intelligent, they tend to be healthier, they tend to be happier, and it makes a lot of sense because society is built on cooperation. And so I think that we've evolved to trust people and to ask questions later.
Where do we stand? With a long list of reasons to be highly skeptical of confidence, and now a long list of reasons why it can be a very good thing. In these two programs we've heard that it's treacherous, it's no signal at all of competence. It can be self-deluding, can make us complacent, arrogant, reckless. It can be a con. But it can also motivate, get us off the couch, make us healthier, enterprising, decisive, help us live up to our potential. And if we suddenly, collectively lose it, that can be ruinous. Which in the end leaves a puzzle. How do we tell good from bad? Some practical first steps from Josephine Perry.
When we're talking about confidence, we want robust confidence. We want confidence that will mean we can bounce back when something's gone wrong. It's not just very fragile and that we've built it up for one competition or one presentation and then it falls again. And there are specific sources we can use to get that. So we talk about probably about 12 different sources of confidence. Some quite fragile ones might be something like, I'm really confident because I've got a great coach. And my coach is fantastic and they went to the Olympics and they've had brilliant training and they make me feel great. And that's really positive until you move house or the coach gets a new job, and then instantly that source of confidence disappears. So we don't want to rely on those. The sources we really want to rely on are the ones that are about our preparation for what we've done. So we know all our bases are covered because we've done everything we can, and knowing we've got the skills and the expertise to do what is required of us.
So tip 1 is to build your confidence on something robust. Above all, invest in your own substance before you invest in hype.
If you have energy to invest, time to practice and train, you should invest that in actually getting better. You should develop your competence at the things that you care about. A strategy of self-delusion where you try to fool yourself into becoming more confident, I cannot recommend it based on the evidence I know.
Most of the time, I have to say I'm not tiptoeing through my day worrying about my decision processes because I have seen tens of thousands of patients.
Anne McGuinness, consultant in emergency medicine at University College Hospital in London, who, like all medics, has invested heavily in substance.
So, having seen so many patients and done a lot of self-education.
Please turn half left in half a mile.